Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which takes place every October and now in its 19th year, is a collaboration between government and private industry to raise awareness about digital security and empower everyone to protect their personal data from digital forms of crime. As organizations continue navigating the pandemic and workforces grapple with the not-so-new normal hybrid office makeup, the economy is experiencing strain under the weight of decades-high inflation, climbing interest rates, and global conflict, which have all led to heightened concerns that a recession is on the horizon. And while no sector is completely immune to worsening economic conditions, many are asking, is the cybersecurity industry positioned well for success despite these economic challenges? Can companies afford to keep spending on more and more tools to protect them from looming attacks, breaches, and persistent threats? Joining me to tackle these issues is Christy Wyatt, CEO of Nasdaq-listed Absolute Software. Christy, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you.
What have ransomware attacks been fueled by?
Well, listen, I think that the frequency of ransomware attacks has clearly gone up as a result of the fact that employees are distributed, they're remote. There's a lot going on in the world. And so I think that makes us more vulnerable. And it's a lot easier to target a bigger attack space than it is when everybody's sort of sitting in the same building. And so you have a little bit of a perfect storm where you have both macro dynamics as well as sort of practical issues in just managing those devices no matter where they happen to be.
What is the shields up mentality?
I think that there are moments in time where we have to be more vigilant, and this is definitely one of them. For all of the reasons I just talked about, I think that cyber attacks and ransomware attacks are no longer necessarily as specifically directed. I think we see them much more frequently. And so this is a moment where we need to be sitting a little bit on the edge of our chairs and watching every one of the assets and every one of our employees to make sure that they are protected all the time. And so I think that really is just a sort of stepping up to the challenge that we know is sitting in front of us right now.
Tell us about the rise of zero trust.
Well, when everybody started working from home, and even now, while we see people starting to go back to the office, we're very much, as an industry, locked in to the understanding that this is going to be a hybrid world, people moving around much more frequently. And so a lot of the security controls and practices that we believed in prior were really dependent on people sitting behind a shield, right? On a premise, in a building. We were watching things from the network. And that can't be true when people are mobile and moving around or working in different locations. And so this is really about building smarter security in the device that's sitting next to the user that has a little bit more contextual awareness. So I'm not just going to ask you for your username and password. I'm going to look at your location. I'm going to look at, what are you trying to do? Is that normal for you? Are your security controls in place? Is everything working the way it's supposed to before I grant access on a transaction by transaction basis? So it's a fundamental shift in how we think about security. There's no longer sort of a wall at the perimeter. So we have to think about the world transaction by transaction. Think of it as how you get challenged when you're trying to do significant financial transactions, but now apply that to people's everyday jobs.
Why is the cybersecurity skills gap driving businesses to rethink their hiring practices?
Well, we saw over the past couple of years the talent gap widen, right? We heard reports of, over almost 1 million open roles sitting in North America alone for cyber roles. And remember, cyber roles can fall into two camps. It can be roles within cyber practices like like the people we hire, or it could be cyber talent sitting within any organization. And so you have 800,000 plus roles open right now. And so that's a lot. Even in the height of the market, that was a lot to fill. And now we have organizations that are also coming under increased budget pressure. So it's a unique skill set. It's difficult to scale, which we've struggled with as an industry. And it really has companies thinking about, how do we build that scale? How do we build that DNA? And then how do we look for additional technology to replace some of that, either service partners or automation that allow us to give some of the same control, even if we don't have the same amount of human capital?
And you just mentioned budget. Has the looming threat of a global recession, is that ushering in additional challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, and I think you used the word immune a little earlier. I don't think there's any sector that is ever completely immune. But I think if you're in a world that's increasingly volatile and you have these massive dynamic shifts in how you work and how you connect with your employees, now's not the time to lower those shields and think about doing less with security. But what you might want to be thinking about is how you do it differently. And so there's been a lot of conversation about shifting some of that spend away from detection and prevention, which we know we've spent a lot on. It's over hundreds of billions of dollars a year annually we're spending on cybersecurity, and investing equally or even more greatly right now in resilience, right? How do we recover when things happen? If we don't have all of the people we want and we don't have all of the tools we want, we need to make sure everything we did spend money and invest in is actually working and there to protect us, and that we are using things like automation to sort of fix things. So the budget challenges will happen, but I think it really is about how we spend more intelligently as opposed to taking our foot off the gas.
So to wrap up here, when we think about the outlook going forward, at the end of the day, what needs to be on the cyber and IT agendas to mitigate risk?
I really think you have to think about both things. There are many common frameworks like NIST and others where it's easy to sort of scorecard yourself and say, am I doing enough? Have I been thoughtful about ransomware? Have I been thoughtful about the different kinds of compromises that could happen within my organization? And then equally, have I been equally thoughtful about how I recover when something bad happens? If a control I installed stops working, do I have automation in place to fix it? If a breach happens, do I have processes and infrastructure in place to be able to recover and restore my business quickly? And can I do both of those things in a highly efficient way? So we're moving from one scorecard, looking for bad things that might happen, and moving to two.
All right, Christy, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.